Our last session for today is a panel discussion. Audiences will remember that a couple years ago we did a very similar discussion. This discussion today is just a reminder of the fact that we are in a different place. We have one phase 1 trial underway and we are getting ready to initiate a second one for CTD. And we are making significant inroads in GAMT. So against that backdrop, just to lay the framework for how I would like this panel to run, we will invite our panelists on board. I do have some questions prepared, but it is very open forum, so I'm happy to walk around and take questions from the audience as well. If I don't see hands raised, then I'm happy to kick us off, keep us going. With that, I'd like to invite Judy Miller, Dr. Longo, Dr. Schulze, Thomas, and Kathleen Martin from Ultragenyx. So I think everybody over here knows everyone, but I do want to give Kathleen an opportunity to introduce herself, and then maybe I'll start looking around the room.
Hello?
Is this on?
Hello? Hi, I'm Kathleen Martin. I'm very excited to be here. Unfortunately, my colleague Richard Collis, who was a medical lead on the program at Ultragenyx, was not able to attend. Oh, okay, sorry. Hi. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, my medical colleague, Richard Collis, was going to be here today, and he had to, he wasn't able to attend for unfortunate reasons, but I'm very happy to be here and speak on behalf of Ultragenyx and our program in CTD. I have a background in neurobiology and a history of working on rare neurological diseases, specifically neurodevelopmental diseases, and have experience recently working on Angelman syndrome, CDKL5 deficiency, vanishing white matter, and now CTD.
So while we wait for the question, there were some questions asked prior to the meeting. And the question is, now there are 2 clinical trials that might potentially start for creatine transporter deficiency, one from Ceres and one from Ultragenyx. We have heard some of the barrier, but I would like from each of you, what is the major issue that you are encountering for starting a clinical trial in patients with creatine transporter deficiency? Just briefly, 2 things. What is the most important? Not
You're
5
further
minutes.
along.
Lady first.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, you know, I'm very excited. We're getting ready to start our phase 1 clinical program. I think many people heard a little bit about it yesterday from our CEO, Emil Kakis. I feel we have a good runway and have a pretty clear path to getting into the phase 1 trial. Our phase 1 trial is similar to the one that was presented by Thomas earlier today. It'll be a healthy volunteer study exploring single and multiple doses. We feel this is actually the quickest way for us to get the safety information we need. So when we go into those first patients with CTD, we have confidence in the safety of our product. And in addition, we're hoping to narrow our dose range. Ours is a small molecule that will be taken orally, and we need to explore quite a large dose range. So we want to hone in on a dose that we feel has the potential to actually be efficacious once we get into patients. Again, quickest way we can move through 30, 40 healthy volunteers and figure that out. So that's part of the reason we selected to start with phase 1 in healthy volunteers. and I mean, our hope is also to relatively quickly after that finish that study and then get into a study in patients, in CTD patients. And that's one of the things we actually want to be developing in parallel, and why we're so excited about the relationship with the ACD, because we really see them as partners to ensure that that first study in patients is actually well designed to suit patients and the community, and will actually give us a good readout of whether our product is actually getting into the brain and doing what we wanted to do, which is to restore creatine.
Well, for us, the main challenge is funding. You know, today we don't have the money to run the phase 2. Hopefully we'll get it in this autumn. Then, I mean, we need to clarify and clear the regulatory path. All the scientific advice and pre-IND meeting needs to be done, and we'll see the answer of the different regulatory authorities. We have already a dialogue with EMA. It is true that we don't have a dialogue yet with FDA. Still, FDA knows about our drug with orphan drug designation and rare pediatric designation, and hopefully both regulatory authorities can be on the same page. There will be this question of methodology. I do think that single case experimental design is the right way of doing it, since the patients are so heterogeneous, and we can see it here. And this is the design for that kind of disease. Now, there will be this question about placebo patient. Single case experimental design don't need a placebo patient. It's just a statistical way of assessing the patient. But we know that regulatory authorities may ask for it. If they do, we will do it for sure.
Thank you so much. So I guess against this backdrop, for the researchers on the panel, how does having industry-led trials change your agenda? What do you think is the next area of focus for you, for this community? You can go ahead.
For me, so obviously, I'm very pleased to see an interest from industry into this field. The reason is that things usually move faster, I would say more scientifically simply because you have to adhere to protocols. And if you do not adhere to protocol, you never advance. You might develop a therapy that might not be correct, but that will help you getting further as you go beyond. I think that what we need, I mean, what I was excited about, I've been coming to this meeting for many years. The last time, 2 years ago, we started foreseeing some possible therapy. Now we have seen really the data on both a small molecule, and Dr. Lipschutz has a very good outline on how it is proceeding with gene therapy in animal model. Obviously, animal model are one thing, and clinical trial are something completely different. But we are seeing that, you know, with the prospect of a commercial product, things can move ahead and can move faster. That it is the way I said, but I would like Dr. Schulze also to, who is also a clinician, and they see a lot of patients as well, to give his opinion.
Thank you. I have two contrary thoughts about that. So first of all, I think the reality is if you want to get an experimental drug to the market, you need industry. So the idea that you do this as an academic thing is almost impossible. It really costs a lot of money. The investment that industry has to do for those tests is huge, and it has to be very proficient. So we academics, we have great ideas, but we are perhaps not the best in kind of performing those kind of tasks. So this is why it has to be industry. There is no way around. That's the one side of it. And industry does a very great job in doing that. So I have full trust. The other side, however, is that it basically takes away all flexibility. So I give examples. So we did clinical trials with an experimental drug, an enzyme for arginase 1 deficiency, ultra rare. And obviously, this enzyme treatment really did a great job normalizing the blood marker, but giving it once a week is perhaps not great because you have this up and down of your pathological molecule, right? As a clinician, you want to see this flat, not an up and down. So ideally, what you would then say is, oh, let's try whether we, instead of giving this, it's only a subcutaneous injection, so it's easy, and families give this at home. Why not giving it 3 times a week with a lower dose? I mean, as a clinician, that would be my question, right? This versus that. But the sponsor didn't allow to do that for a good reason, because the purpose of industry, of the sponsor, is to complete the test and get the drug to the market. So they didn't allow any deviation. And that's now, when you now read what is there, if you want to use this drug for your patient, you have to give this once a week. So that's why sometimes it is great to have academia doing those tests, but the reality is it has to be industry if you really want to get this to the market. There's no way around.
My next question is for Dr. Miller. So Dr. Miller, you led a natural history study for this population. There were a lot of learnings from it. We have in the past spoken about initiating a natural history study for GAMT, and you touched on it briefly. I wanted to understand from you, what were your learnings maybe from the CTD natural history study? What are maybe some things that you might consider doing differently for the GAMT population?
Great. Is this okay? It doesn't sound like it from when you're holding it. Okay, one challenge is a natural history study, by definition, is studying the course in the absence of a treatment. And there is a treatment for GAMT. So you would never tell families, well, it's really important for us to learn the natural history, so please don't treat your children for the next 5 to 10 years. So that's not feasible, that's not viable, and that wouldn't be the right thing to do for multiple reasons. So I think if you wanted to do a natural history of GAMT, you would have to do a retrospective, like, chart review, essentially, of what records can we find that were collected, not just in hindsight. So when I was describing the pilot study, I interviewed families, and I would make a differentiation of, like, tell me, as it was happening, when was the first time you were worried about your kid? And their answer would be usually like age 2 or 3 years old. Now that you know what's happening, go back in time and tell me, when do you think the first sign was? And they're like, oh, probably because he missed his crawling milestone at 6 months, right? But that's not what they were worried about when he was 6 months old. So you want to collect records because that was the documentation of reality at the time, right? So I think the way to do a GAMT natural history at this point would be to try to do a record review study. And it would be pretty messy because everybody's going to have different amount of records. Some kids are going to have testing from school, some are not. But I think what you would try to do is collect that, see what kind of information you have, what kind of consistency can you find in terms of data, and then how can you interpret that? And, part of the fun and the excitement of coming to this symposium is I get to meet with people who I don't see during the rest of the year. And so last night at dinner, I don't think he's still here. Jagdeep Walia and I were, is he here? Okay. We were brainstorming just this thing, and we wrote out a plan. We invited people. We're going to send a when to meet to the people that we need to get together to try to do something like this. I think that'd be really great, and it's part of the beauty of this symposium.
We'll stay on GAMT for a little bit longer. So newborn screening for GAMT is expanding, which means that we are likely going to have children who can be identified and potentially have access to some kind of treatment at birth. This brings up the possibility that we will soon have a stratification in the GAMT population. You will have some older GAMT patients who missed the window of diagnosis and some very young GAMT patients who are going to be diagnosed at birth. So given that backdrop, what do you think a therapy needs to accomplish in each population? How would you think about the bar that we need to get over for something to get approved in that population across both strata?
Yeah, okay, I start, and then you hear what I say, then you know what she asked. Okay. So for any age group in GAMT deficiency, the diagnosis and start of treatment is beneficial. There is no doubt, because prior to having newborn screening and having identified children pre-symptomatically, we only saw what the benefit of treatment is in symptomatic children and even adults. And in every child and every patient, you could see how much benefit they had. Even if it was only stopping the seizures, that's a huge treatment success. So we will learn more about this, but quite honestly, I think we know already that if babies are identified pre-symptomatically and treated with maximum effect, they have just a almost normal development. I think 10, 20 years from now, we will more talk about those minor things. There might still be some deficits, some problems or so. Right now, we consider this as normal and are fine, but, and then, I'm looking at Heidi because, yeah, so even if our treatments are good, they really make a difference to patients, but still we have not solved the issue. And when patients get older, there are some problems coming up that we would not necessarily expect because we are so happy with our treatments, but in fact, it's not perfect. That is why any attempt to get a better treatment, genetic therapies or so, is worthwhile to do.
Yeah, if I might add a few things, the disease for which newborn screening was started is phenylketonuria. So, and in PKU, there are very many similarities with GAMT deficiency. You start the therapy at birth and you prevent intellectual disability. 20, 30, 40 years after starting newborn screening for PKU, we are seeing that there are still a few unsolved problems. They are very minor compared to the initial problem. Let's start from this one. It has been a big success. And I think that, the introduction of newborn screening for GAMT has been a success for the ACD and for all of the patient community. Now, is there the need for additional therapy? I would say yes, because the therapy is not a benign therapy. I mean, it is benign in terms of what you have to take. It's not that the medication have a lot of side effects, but it is hard to implement on a day-to-day basis. So, and that it is why I would say that, even to the industry, if there is a way of finding a system to simplify the therapy for GAMT, that will obviously simplify the life of people, but also will prevent some of the late-term complications that we are seeing now in phenylketonuria in patients who were diagnosed 40, 50 years ago.
My next question is for our industry experts. For CTD, there's currently no newborn screening program. If that changed, if diagnosis at birth became feasible, what do you think that unlocks for companies like yours that are developing therapies and working with regulators to get them approved? This side.
Okay. I actually think it would be hugely transformative if we had newborn screening for CTD therapies. It would be fantastic if we could run such a trial as Dr. Longo described, where we were looking to actually prevent the onset of symptoms rather than actually treat those symptoms. So I actually would hope that as a community, there is a push to get newborn screening and to start trying to get that in place, because it would be fantastic if when one of us brought the first CTD treatment into commercial use, that we were ready to go with that newborn screening. I think it would be hugely valuable.
Can I ask you to hold it closer?
Yeah.
I feel like it's
No, I fully agree with you. It will be fantastic if we can treat the patient as soon as they are born. The youngest they are, probably the better the results. The other thing is that today we don't really know the exact prevalence of the disease. There was a publication from the ICD saying it's around 1/200,000 people. There was some previous assessment saying it's 1/50,000 people. And, so the more number of patients, the highest number of patients we will have in the community, the also more the interest of investor we will get. So this kind of tests are really key in rare disease and in ultra rare disease specifically.
I'm going to
Just
open
so-
it up to the.
Can I just add one more thing? I also think it would be very important with CTD, because if we did have that newborn screening, that would allow us to fill that gap that Judith was just talking about in terms of the natural history, to really capture that data of that early onset symptoms systematically, as well as we would have that population in place for trials. So I think it would also then enable additional products that or compounds to be evaluated. You might have that natural history, so you wouldn't require that placebo control, or you could have that natural history as a comparator.
I have to add one comment, right? That is kind of wishful thinking, but it's unrealistic, because one of the primary principles of newborn screening is that's a treatable condition, right? So this is kind of in circulus vitiosus. If you say, okay, let's get the screening, then we can develop the treatment. No, the treatment has to be there first, unfortunately. And I mean, the GAMT is the best example. No, but they would not accept adding GAMT screening to the recommended uniform screening panel until they had proof that the screening and the early identification changes the outcome. So it really took time to get those first two pre-symptomatically diagnosed and treated cases until newborn screening could have been, was accepted.
Great. Opening up the floor to questions to keep the conversation going.
Sorry, my question isn't on newborn screening. Okay. I guess I have a question for Kathleen. I'm not sure, Thomas, because I didn't see it in the inclusion-exclusion criteria, but yesterday it was mentioned that you will have to come off the supplements to be able to join the trials. Although it's not a standard of care for the kids, some kids really do benefit from it. Would you be willing to maybe have it as a rescue therapy if you don't see any changes or see worsening, to just retain those patients in your placebo group? Or can we be on a stable dose before going into the trial, just so that we still see those benefits, or the kids do not get worse? If we come off before the trial, I feel like in the placebo group it will be worsened, so that the I guess the difference will be even more significant than what you would normally see it compared to in the real world.
I mean, I definitely appreciate the complexity there, and it's certainly something we could explore. Certainly having had that treatment background, especially being along the same mechanism. I mean, I think normally in a trial like this, we would allow patients, for example, to be on, if they were on epileptic drugs or something else like that. But actually introducing another creatine therapy could certainly be confounding. Again, I think the idea of having it as a rescue, but I think also, you know, as Emil mentioned yesterday, I mean, part of the goal, at least for an initial trial in patients, would be to try and identify as quickly as possible that change. You know, where are we seeing a change so that potentially there wouldn't be a long placebo period, but also if we weren't seeing it in patients, you know, as a parent, you could decide, wait a minute, I don't think this is helping my child. So you'll have to make that call. But yeah, it's definitely something we will take seriously, but you can understand how it would add complexity to the interpretation of any results, and certainly a regulatory body would notice that.
Yeah, I would just add that in Europe, and maybe in France, there are probably less patients taking creatine than here in the US. If you look at the literature, you had also different trials on neurological disease with oral creatine against placebo. And in the result of this kind of trial, in the urine, everybody had creatine, meaning that the patient or the family of the patient were going to the pharmacy, buying oral creatine, whatever the patient was receiving. So I think the key thing is to not look at creatine in the blood and maybe not really look at MRS as a biomarker. But I would love to hear Dr. Longo and Dr. Schulze on their appreciation of oral creatine today in CTD. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it useful? Is it not useful? I think that would be interesting to get their appreciation.
Nicola?
So I think that obviously there is some type of therapy. It would be nice if we're uniformly effective, at least to a minimum degree. And, you know, I think that's something it does, but, you know, but at the same time, it would be very hard. From a regulatory perspective, one way around it would be if one could find a way of utilizing the existing newborn screening to identify this condition, so it would become a secondary target. So the way that newborn screening is determined in the United States is there are primary targets of newborn screening that are covered because they really have met all of the criteria that Dr. Schulze is listing. And then there are secondary targets that simply you pick them up while you pick up the primary target. In those conditions, nobody has done any study. If one could use the existing testing to identify creatine transporter deficiency, that it would be done. I don't think it can be done for now, but, you know, I think that, you know, one can think creatively this way. And I'm always impressed by the registry of the ACD. Why am I impressed? Because, you know, we have no idea of what is the frequency of GAMP deficiency in the population. But we will obtain it because now we have the uniform newborn screening. And what we know from the registry is individuals with creatine transporter deficiency are at least 2.5 times more prevalent than those with GAMP deficiency. What it means is that the frequency of CTD, just on a clinical basis, is at least 2.5 times higher. So obviously we know that the disease is more prevalent and it is a more pronounced public health issue. And that it is why I think that eventually we should need to move in that direction.
Yeah, to answer more directly your question about creatine and creatine transporter deficiency. So first my answer is what I do. I don't treat with creatine except if the kids are very young, so only infants and perhaps up to 4 or 5 years, and then I discontinue creatine supplementation, perhaps for 2 reasons. One is there is really no proven efficiency of creatine supplementation. And second is more a theoretical or an academic observation, and that is that we have now evidence that creatine controls creatine transporter expression negatively. So creatine downregulates creatine transporter expression. So it's a mechanism. It's creatine controls its own synthesis and uptake, making sure that our cells have the right amount of creatine, but also not too much. So this is the evolutionary aspect of it. That is good, but of course it's not great for patients with inborn errors in creatine metabolism. But in fact, there is an argument to say that if you treat with creatine, you may even downregulate the residual creatine transporter activity. So, but that's more an academic argument. I have no proof that this plays a role, but I don't recommend creatine treatment for creatine transporter patients if they are a little bit older.
All right, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate all you guys have been doing. I heard the biggest, over and over, a barrier was money. I just didn't know if there was an actual dollar amount on that. And then a second question that if I was like a private investor or stakeholder in your company, do you have a realistic timeline that you could tell us that would make me invest in potentially a remedy to the CTD?
Well, today for investor, we are looking for like $20 million for the next 3 years. All these dollars will not, all of them will not go for CTD. We have some other project. So, but to run I would say an efficient trial that hopefully will be accepted by the regulatory authorities, $10 million will be what we need for the next years. And I'm looking for it. I have some, good lead, but nothing is yet signed, so I don't have the money yet. Well, I was saying exactly the same thing 2 years ago, so hopefully I will be able to clarify things in the next months. But this is my job as a CEO, and this is the worst job, It's like being as a burglar in the subway with your hat, begging for money. Everybody is terrible. And if we get this money, we will start the trial middle of next year. And we think that it will be between our enrollments, the months of observation followed by the months of treatment, and then the months to analyze the result. It will be like 2 years. So it means an answer in 2029.
I have a question for actually both of you, Kathleen and Thomas. Have you considered, and is it possible to use your potential treatment, your treatment coming for compassionate early access? That's my first question for both of your product. And the second question only for Kathleen. I know in previous clinical trials you have done, you did it in the US, but you also conduct them in France and Europe. And I know for many molecules, in the past 5 or 10 years. So is it something that could be considered too with the UX068?
Compassionate use was the first question. And definitely, Ultragenyx does have a significant compassionate use program, but before we can get into compassionate use, we do have to have the product demonstrate that safety. So again, I think that is definitely something that we sort of build into many of our overall programs, but that said, we obviously need to ensure that what we're taking in for compassionate use is indeed safe. So that's something that could potentially happen once we had proven those first hurdles. And in terms of global trials, definitely Ultragenyx does have a success record in rare disease, I mean, really for rare disease, you pretty much need to go global because the patients are quite spread out, and in order to recruit the numbers you would need, you often go global. So for example, the current trial that we're conducting in Angelman syndrome, which again, it is a different neurodevelopmental disease, but it has many of those core outcome components of cognition, behavior, communication, motor skills. They are being assessed, and we're running that trials in that disease in 22 countries that include US, Europe, South America, Japan, Australia, really very global. So it definitely, once we are getting into a trial that requires that global enrollment, which would be, I think, what was designed as the phase 2-3, it would definitely include countries around the world.
And regarding compassionate program, we were solicited by some medical doctors in France for a patient. He was at that time 6 months old, but exactly what say Kathleen, at that time the phase 1 was ongoing, so we didn't have enough proof of safety to go for the program. Now we have the proof of safety. What we need is the motivation of the medical doctor to cut the red tape of all the paperwork. And, you know, it takes time. It's very administrative in France. It may happen, we don't know, but we're ready to participate in that kind of program.
We're going to do the last 2 questions over here.
It's the last 50 questions, but I'm joking. This is actually for Thomas. It's for every single one of you guys, but for Thomas, I know that right now you're only doing Europe, so the question's for you and also to the other panelists. So the questions are as follows. Cost per kid, let's just say we get a group of people that want to move to Europe in order for us to be part of that study. Cost per kid, how many kids would be in the study? How long will it take for the country to release the meds, since we live in the US? Cost of the medication. Are you guys willing to, no, this is very important. Are you guys willing to use other coordinators like physicians here in the United States? Path for approval for FDA. And also, as someone that likes to raise money for ACD, if I wanted to allocate, because every single one of you guys is asking for funding. So me having another nonprofit, I'm asking you guys this. If I was able to get the money that you require, if I'm allocating that money to your research, how many kids would you guys be able to put, like, make sure that went into that research? Because I could say, hey, you know what? I believe in Thomas, and I want to make sure that my money gets allocated to every single, to you. Or otherwise, I could say for Ultragenyx, I want to know how many kids have the possibility to be part of the study with the money we give you. Let's just say we raise $10 million and we allocate that money to you. What could you do for us as parents? Like I've been going I went to the Europe Symposium, and thank you guys for what you guys are doing. Thank you also, doctors, for what you guys are doing. I think you guys are doing awesome. And yes, funding, it's very important. But as a father, time's of the essence. My son's bones are breaking. He's having seizures. Every day I wake up, I don't know if he's going to wake up. I can't travel a lot far because I don't know if he's going to have a seizure. 10 minutes away from the house, he's almost died 5 times last year. So time is of the essence. So for me, if I'm going to work, I work 12 hours a day. If I'm going to allocate my time from my family and take away so I could look for research for you to get funding, what could you do for us as parents? Since none of us are like billionaires here, we're all working people, what could you do for us?
Well, for just to answer your what you say. First of all, in Europe, a non-profit cannot give the money to a profit organization. So that's, you know, if ACD wanted to give us $10 million tomorrow, it won't be acceptable. However, someone can invest in the company, so became a shareholder. And there's a pre-money value and then post-money value, etc. But it's investing in a company. Second thing, if I get $10 million from an investor, what we will do with Ceres is we will open a center in the US. It will be much more efficient than make you and your family travel to France. And the other thing is, as I was saying in my talk previously, usually in France, people who enter a clinical trial needs to benefit from the national French social security, meaning that if anything happens while they are on the French territory, they can be taken care of by the state. Just, it's a 6-month trial plus the observation, so we are talking about, let's say, 1 year in France. You had a car accident during the study. You will need care, and so the French states will require that. Now, how to benefit from the French national security, I don't know exactly, but usually it's working in France for a certain amount of time. It's not too many months, but it's a few months. So that needs to be done. Then European people benefit from the French national security usually due to some agreement between the states in European Union. But I would assume, I don't know, if I had a kid who had a CTD and Ultragenyx were doing his trial only in the US, being a European father, I will have exactly the same question as yours, and maybe the USA will tell me, well, you're not American, you cannot benefit from the trial. I don't know for that.
It's a challenging question to answer, and definitely appreciate your sense of urgency. And I have to say that is a sense that I feel Ultragenyx does appreciate, as Emil mentioned yesterday. I mean, we all know that every day matters to parents, and are working and want to push forward our program as quickly as possible. But right now, in one sense, I don't feel our program at this exact time is being limited by money. It definitely requires time. I mean, right now we're in the process of actually manufacturing the product that has its own time course that needs to be completed. Then, as I said, we wanted to get into healthy volunteers. We feel it's the quickest way to get that sense of safety, that then when we introduce it into CTD patients, we will be safe, but we can also get it into them at a dosage that will be efficacious for them. So I can't really address the question of what it would take, but again, we do acknowledge that sense of urgency and do want to move quickly, again, and design our trials in an adaptive way that if we are seeing positive efficacy, we have the possibility then to change the trial and potentially expand it more rapidly, or be able to be adaptive to seeing that positive results. Anyone else?
You want to add something?
Sorry. Speaking of money, I think I want people to also recognize, so industry partners are critical, but I also want people to know that and all of the stuff that's working now is because of decades of investment from government-funded research that is always at risk of getting lost. So just keep in mind that it's not industry alone that can do this. You guys have heard a lot of studies happening this weekend, and they're not all industry partners, right? They're happening at universities, they're happening at academic centers. Those things are usually funded by government, and government investment in that in the US has been the reason that the US has been such a global leader in innovative care. And so I don't think people fully understand how awesome science is, and so it's easy to slash scientific funding, and then you get scientists who are like competing with each other for money when there should just be more money. Why are we cutting funding for research when there's so much good research that could be happening. So just keep that in mind, that we need all of it. We need industry, we need NIH, we need HRSA, we need CDC, we need all the government, we need other governmental, other countries' governments, all of that happening at the same time.
One last question for Dr. Miller, and it's semi-related to what you just said. We had the pilot study and we had the natural history study, which followed those patients for that approximately, like, was it 6 or 10 years, however long it was. But earlier it was also mentioned that one of the problems we're looking at, or not necessarily problems, but the fact that a lot of the newer studies, it's a lot of the younger patients. Is there any interest or is there any avenue for those participants who volunteered way back then to again be picked up as they go on with their life at certain intervals so that a full natural history can be put together?
That's a great idea. Yeah, I think longitudinal studies often happen in pieces where you've got a group and then you can make a case like, hey, we've got this unique set of families that we saw 5 years ago, and you try to get funding to see them again. So that could happen from a government study, that could happen from an industry partner. But yeah, it's a great idea and a great thing. And I have one more thing at the very end before. Okay.
No, the only thing that I wanted to add is that many times industry is required to do post-marketing studies in which they really follow the patient who have been receiving the drug for many, many years. And that contributes a different type of natural history because the treatment history, but obviously having baseline data in which patients have not been treated, as Dr. Miller was saying, would have been essential to determine efficacy of therapy.
Were you closing this out? Okay, the last thing I wanted to do was, I'm not sure that we acknowledged Carol enough from Extraordinaire. The French group has been amazing, and your work with Extraordinaire has been incredible. And I think a lot of families here probably don't even understand the contributions that you've made. And it is a big deal for it to be now joined with ACD and to have like one global entity. So I think we should acknowledge that, and I think we should give you a robust round of applause for everything that you've done. Woohoo!
I would like to invite our board chair, ACD board chair, and CTD parent to deliver the closing remarks for our symposium today.
Hello? Okay. Don't worry, this is going to be about 6 minutes. But I'm going to preface everyone, when I read through this as a practice, I got kind of emotional. So if that happens, just be warned. Anyway, wow, what a great few days. For those who don't know me, my name is Daniel Coller. I've had the privilege of serving as the board chair for a little bit over 3 years. My son Cadman is 11 and has CTD, and many of you have met him or heard him or experienced his hand in your hair at dinner last night. As we close the symposium, I want to thank everyone who's made this meeting possible. The researchers, clinicians, industry partners, sponsors, donors, volunteers, families, and the ACD board and staff. We covered a lot. Outcome measures, biomarkers, registries, clinical endpoints, newborn screening, disease models, therapeutic strategies, trial readiness, small molecules, large molecules, and gene therapy. I do hope, though, that you've taken more away from this than a deeper understanding of the research and the science. These are rare diseases, and we are a small community. We need to support each other towards the common good. I left my name badge in my room, so I'm missing all the flair, showing that this is my 4th in-person symposium. And I still vividly remember my first one 8 years ago. Although vividly may not be the right word for the blur of emotions that I experienced that weekend in Austin. I came in wide-eyed and scared. I was trying to understand the science, the research, and what all of it meant for my child and my family. I was relying on high school biology and Google. Didn't have ChatGPT back then. The acronyms came at me fast: AGAT, GAMT, CTD, MRS, GAA, ATP, ADP. At the time, I thought AGAT was a precious stone. ATP hosted the US Open, and I used ADP to process payroll. Suddenly, I was supposed to understand cellular energy, creatine transport, biomarkers, and clinical endpoints. And it was and still is somewhat overwhelming. So I want to pause here and I want to ask all the new families, please stand up or raise your hand. Make yourself known. You guys did it. You showed up. It may sound simple, but it's not. It takes courage to walk into a room like this and face hard information, ask hard questions, and start finding your place in this community. You know, to the families who've been a part of the ACD for years, you've shown what it means to turn your fear into action. You advocate, you fundraise, you participate in research, you fundraise. You complete survey after survey, you fundraise. You share your experience and you fundraise. You help the new families understand that they're not alone. And yes, you fundraise. Right, one sec. While we're family driven at our core, turning the family urgency into real progress requires structure, discipline, and focus. It means setting clear priorities, making thoughtful funding decisions, supporting the right research, and building strong partnerships, and using limited resources wisely. That's where the ACD board and staff play such a critical role. I'd like to recognize our staff and consultants. Please stand or raise your hand. Sangeeta Iyer, Colleen Weathers, Alina Riviera Campo, Katie Polshiver, Emily Reinhart, Ashley Duque, Tanya Harmon, and Andrew Marshall. Thank you all. Much of the board's work is not visible. It happens in meetings, committee calls, budget reviews, grant decisions, fundraising discussions, strategic planning, and hard conversations about where time and resources have the greatest impact. For our board, please stand as I say your name. Kim Tuminella. And stay. Jeffrey or Randy Allen. Celeste Graham. Aaron Coller. Carol Chetoa. Jenny Lynn. Mikkel Law, who couldn't be here this weekend. Our two newest members, Kelly Johnston and Krista Volt. And lastly, Matt Henley and Sung Chen. As I mentioned, I've been board chair for over 3 years, and while I'm remaining on the board, I'm pleased to announce our new board chair, Matt Henley, and our new vice chair, Sung Chun. I feel so confident in their leadership, and I really look forward to supporting them in the future. And each board member brings countless hours of time, judgment, experience, and commitment. You know, every board member is a parent of a child with CCDS. Every board member has a day job. Every board member has family responsibilities, the medical needs, therapies, and the same pressures many people in this room face. And still they keep showing up. But they need help. If you want to get more involved, please grab one of us or Heidi, and we'd love to talk to you. Speaking of Heidi, I really want to give you special recognition. When I think about commitment, I cannot think of anyone who better exemplifies what it means to dedicate your life to a cause. Heidi, your leadership, persistence, and passion have made an enormous difference for this organization, for this community, and for my son. Thank you. I'm almost through it. So the World Cup's underway, and I have to make a metaphor. Everyone remembers the players who score the winning goal, but the champions aren't won by one player. unless you're from Argentina and you have Messi on your team. They're won because someone made the pass before the pass, because defenders did the work no one noticed, because coaches developed a strategy, because the fans cheered them on, because the groundskeeper kept the grass perfect, because the entire organization gave it their all in the way they could. This is no different. Researchers, clinicians, industry partners, families, donors, volunteers, staff, and board members all have different roles. But in order to win, we need to score goals. We're going to miss a lot of the shots we take, but the more we take, the more goals will be scored. I'm just a dad who loves his son, sorry guys. Our job is to build the conditions for the goals to happen, treatments, outreach, and educations. And for me, winning has a clear meaning. Winning means a child is diagnosed earlier. Winning means a family gets answers. Winning means a clinical trial opens. Winning means an effective treatment reaches the children who need it. That is what we're working toward. And as board chair, I leave the position and the symposium so encouraged by the progress we've made, but I am very aware of the work that still needs to be done. There's still a gap. It's moving forward, it's getting faster, the conversations are more specific, the plans are more practical. Clinical trial readiness is becoming less theoretical and more operational. But there is still a gap between promising science and changed lives, and closing that gap is the work in front of us. So my ask is this: don't leave the fire and energy from this symposium here in Utah. Take the relationships you made home and build on them. Researchers and clinicians, those side conversations you're having in the hallway or over lunch are precious. Please continue those and don't wait for the next conference to follow up. ACD is here as a conduit for anyone in this community if you need it. Call us and tell us what you need. We have risen to the challenge time and time again. Families, take what you learned here back with you. Stay connected, keep asking questions, keep participating, and keep pushing. And to everyone, thank you for contributing to the symposium and the work ahead. Enjoy the gala tonight. Thank you.